If ever there were a question whether a deep state existed, you got your answer this week. You witnessed it up close and personal. In fact, you met their cover, their shill, their beard. A man who, regardless of what he may have been in the past, and I don't take any of that away from him, is nothing more than a front for the deep state. A man removed from the actual investigation who gave carte blanche to slap his name on a report the deep state wrote. Now, I've been talking to you about the deep state for a long time. I wrote about them in my last book, Liars, Leakers, and Liberals, The Case Against the Anti-Trump Conspiracy. But now you saw it in real time. A man who knew virtually nothing about a 2-year, $35 million investigation he supposedly ran. In his testimony before Congress, he used his open as a prophylactic to preemptively stop any questions about FBI involvement in 2016 and 2017, and any questions about Christopher Steele, the author of the infamous dossier. His mandate to investigate any coordination between the Russian government and the Trump campaign, as well as matters that arise from the investigation. And this guy will not talk about how the investigation started, what the basis was to start it, if there even was one at all, and what the origins were of the Steele dossier, the most fundamental piece of evidence in the entire matter. Look, we all thought something was awry with Mueller's 9-minute press conference back in May, when he had to read the whole statement and then had to correct what he had mistakenly said. Funny, the same thing happened here when Mueller corrected himself again. He wasn't saying he would charge Trump, but for the OLC policy that doesn't allow the indictment of a sitting president. Rather, he meant he didn't make a decision whether Trump broke the law because of OLC. Really, Bob? Then why did you come to a conclusion on collusion? Why bother if you felt you couldn't indict, even if you found it? Look, I'm going to make this very easy for you. The Democrats were hoisted on their own petard. They swore that Trump was a puppet and a Russian agent, and they ran with it for almost 3 years. They maligned and destroyed families in their desperate attempt to take our president down. The man that you wouldn't dare get between him and a camera, Adam Schiff, swore he had real, actual, significant evidence of Trump's collusion with Russia that we haven't seen. How this guy even shows up in public, let alone refuses to resign as chair of the House Committee on Intelligence, is stunning. He is a stone-cold liar. He had no evidence, and he was willing to lie for political power. He even said Mueller would breathe life into the report. Mueller not only didn't breathe life into the report, he sucked the life out like lemonade on a hot summer day at a dry racetrack. There were so many faux pas by Mueller as he stumbled and struggled, it was painful. Now, why would Rod Rosenstein in 2017 bring a man in his condition to apply to be head of the FBI a 10-year term? And when Trump didn't hire him, Rosenstein appoints him special counsel. Why? Because the deep state needed a front, a guy with impeccable credentials in the military and law enforcement. Although I, for one, always questioned his actions as FBI director during the Whitey Bulger case and his absurd decision in the Ray Rice domestic violence case. But the FBI, Comey, Strzok, Page, and the whole lot of them, they needed to keep someone there to prevent any real investigation into their plot to remake America. They think they're more powerful than the president and the American people. And after seeing Mueller, we now understand why, although a letter was sent under Mueller's signature saying he didn't like Barr's assessment of the report, on the phone he tells Barr he had no problem with it. It's because he didn't write the letter. His Trump-hating pit bulls did. And where there are references in the report of people lying and no charges filed, Well, take a look.
Joseph Nipson's a guy who told Papadopoulos, the mysterious professor who lives in Rome and London. This is the guy who told Papadopoulos. He's the guy who starts it all. And when the FBI interviews him, he lies 3 times, and yet you don't charge him with a crime.
Can't get into that.
Did you interview Nipson?
Can't get into that.
The guy who launches the guy who puts this whole story in motion, you can't charge him.
Jim Comey lied. James McCabe lied. Peter Strzok. No consequence to any of them. Christopher Steele, Fusion GPS, Hillary Clinton, all off limits. But the report barely mentions them. Folks, you and I know more about this report than he did. The man wasn't familiar with Fusion GPS, of its own ties to Russia, which Hillary Clinton and the DNC laundered money through to give to a foreign agent to reach the Russians to get dirt on Trump. How is it possible to look at Russian interference, which was Mueller's charge, if you fail to look at the Steele dossier and the role of it and the corrupt players in the FBI and the DOJ? And the man had the temerity to say the dossier was out of his purview.
It's outside my purview. It's outside my purview. With regard to the Steele, that's beyond my purview. As I said before, and I'll say again, it's not my purview.
And by the way, he said things were beyond his purview more than 10 times, and that he could not or would not discuss topics about 100 times. He said he didn't know if Christopher Steele lied, and the origins of the dossier, the fundamental document which was the basis of the FISA warrant, the Russia investigation, and the whole campaign. How could he say it's beyond his purview? It's in the report. And why was his whole team comprised of Trump-hating, Hillary-loving sycophants? His answer was laughable. He said he wasn't allowed political questions. He obviously thinks we're stupid. Any U.S. attorney, DA, special counsel, or even a private law firm would not hire someone simply on the basis of a resume unless you already decided you wanted them on your team. Please explain why Jeanine Pirro, counsel for the Clinton Foundation, wasn't known to have represented the foundation. The FBI and other agencies all do background checks on these lawyers. Anyone in the justice system, especially in Washington, would know that Andrew Weissmann is one of the most notoriously unethical prosecutors in the nation. Even the United States Supreme Court has said so. He has a history of prosecutorial misconduct and of sending innocents to jail. And how can anyone believe that he randomly and blindly selected the best lawyers, so many Trump haters, so many on the record Hillary lovers, and not accidentally get one Republican in there is just plain stupid. The Democrats say Mueller did not exonerate the president. Exonerate? Where the hell is that from? That is an attempt to malign the president. I've told you this before. I don't know one prosecutor who has ever said anything like that. You either indict or you say nothing. By saying you cannot exonerate, Mueller or whoever prepped him up for this hearing is basically leaving the president with an anchor around his neck, not allowing him to even rebut whatever the claim that he's not exonerated from is. This is the Democrats turning Lady Justice on her head. Republicans, we now know from the Brett Kavanaugh hearings, are not entitled to the presumption of innocence. They are not entitled to be believed. And now, when we cannot exonerate them, we have a totally new sphere in our justice system that is a limbo that can never be resolved, since you can never plead your case in a courtroom. These radicals have tried to remake America. They continually create rules we've never heard of. They didn't investigate the Steele dossier. They didn't investigate whether the Russians targeted Christopher Steele or whether Steele made it all up. This radical group of ideologues tried to use their power to overturn an election, the most outrageous abuse of power in American political history. Maybe someday we will know the truth about the attempted framing of the president by the FBI and DOJ officials, and, more importantly, whether that plot goes all the way to the top. as Lisa Page said to Peter Strzok, her lover, on September 9, 2016, quote, POTUS wants to know everything we're doing. And that's my open. Let me know what you think on my Facebook and Twitter, hashtag Judge Jeanine. Here now with a reaction to my open, the left's response to the Mueller testimony and what comes next. President Trump's attorney, Rudy Giuliani. All right, Mr. Mayor, good to have you here. Thanks for being here in studio. Love having you here. All right. I'm not even going to ask you what you thought of the report because we're going to waste time. What I want to know are some specific answers. And the first question I'm going to ask you is based upon something that Matt Gaetz, representative, asked the director. Can you state with confidence that the Steele dossier was not part of Russia's disinformation campaign? And Mueller says, no, I said my opening statement that part of the building of the case predated me by at least 10 months. So he's saying he couldn't talk about the Steele dossier. What does that tell you?
Well, I don't understand the answer. It's, among others, one of the incoherent answers that he gave, which is another question. But how you could not investigate the Steele dossier and say you were investigating Russian interference in the 2016 election is a complete contradiction, if not a false statement, if not a lie. I mean, he wasn't mandated with just investigating, can you put a case against Donald Trump?
Right.
He was 2016 interference.
Right.
Well, Hillary Clinton interfered through the Steele dossier.
Exactly.
Because he reached out for Russian officials, also Ukrainian officials. That's also foreign interference. He ignored that. So after you counted up his 10, it is not in my purview.
Right.
What you end up with is you can, by process of elimination, figure out his purview. He eliminated everything but one thing: frame Trump, which Weissman was an expert on.
He was, obviously, he's very good at it.
Done, as he has other human beings whose rights have been lost. And the thing about the liberal press that is really frightening, they used to be a defender of people's rights when it didn't matter if you were even a good guy or a bad guy, or a Republican or a Democrat, or during McCarthyism. This is as bad or worse. Actually, this may be worse than McCarthyism because there are more people involved than just Joe McCarthy. Donald Trump has been subjected to a completely new an authoritarian set of rules, and they can't even wake up and see it. I mean, the minute I saw the word exonerate in the report with Jay Sekulow, I can't tell you what I said. Your language was not language I can repeat on television about them, because to any prosecutor ever write the word exonerate,
you and I both
tells
know
me they've given away all ethics,
right,
all common sense, and any dedication to 2,000 years of law, which is you can't prove a negative.
Right. Well, you either indict or you keep your mouth shut. You either indict.
That's a new rule for Trump.
Well, right. And they turn Lady Justice upside down. You know, whether it's Brett Kavanaugh or anyone else. But you're right on the point, and I pulled the scope of the Mueller investigation. Any links or coordination between the Russian government and individuals associated with the campaign and any manners that may arise directly from the investigation.
Right.
Since the Steele dossier was built based upon Hillary Clinton's paying through Perkins Coie and then to Fusion GPS and then to Christopher Steele, who supposedly went to the Russians, he had an obligation to investigate the Steele dossier. It's all there.
There's either two explanations. He never read what his mandate was, or he didn't know what his mandate was.
They knew the mandate because he
I'm
was
not sure
the
he
front.
did. I don't know how much he knows.
He was nothing but a front, Mr. Mayor. He was the shill. He was the beard. They picked him because he couldn't understand it.
Okay, I mean, when you look at him, and I don't want to overstate this, but doesn't a responsible person come to the conclusion he shouldn't be in charge of something serious? Okay, it is sad.
It is sad.
Except that the person it's sad is for is the president, not him.
Yeah.
He shouldn't have been there.
Right.
He should at least have enough self-control to realize, I can't do this anymore. But how about the characters around him?
Right.
Why didn't they ever come forward and say, "Hey, Bob, you're not up to this"?
Yeah. Well, they wanted him
because
there.
they were the inmates running the asylum.
They were the inmates. Look, that is the deep state. That's why I said at the beginning of my open, if you ever questioned whether a deep state existed, you just saw it. He was the beard, the cover, the shill. Now, I want you to look at this, listen to this sound of Nadler, where the Dems are all hyped up now about impeachment. Take a listen.
Anyone else who acted in this way, if they were not the sitting president, would face criminal prosecution, would face indictments. Only the Office of Legal Counsel's opinion that you cannot indict a sitting president has saved or is saving the president from indictment.
Now, before we go to questions, I want to add one correction to my testimony this morning. I want to go back to one thing that was said this morning by Mr. Liu, who said, and I quote, "You didn't charge the president because of the OLC opinion." That is not the correct way to say it. As we say in the report, and as I said at the opening, we did not reach a determination as to whether the president committed a crime.
So what Mueller said was OLC had nothing to do with it. And after Mueller said that, Nadler is another corrupt deep stater who I don't know what his goal is other than take Donald Trump down. He comes out and says anyone else would have been indicted. The OLC prevented them from indicting him. He lied.
Directly, clearly, without any doubt, he completely lied. But this is the man who decided to impeach him 2 years ago. This is the guy that was caught on the Amtrak because he's got a big mouth and a considerably smaller brain. He was saying something like, here's how we're going to indict him. This is the schedule. This is before the report was even completed.
Right.
So this is a hanging judge who's made up the determination. Basically, Nadler and Schiff, even Nadler more than Schiff, because his mouth runs a little more than Schiff, and his brain may be a little smaller. So what Nadler says basically is, you're guilty. It doesn't matter what Mueller says. We don't even pay attention to Mueller.
Right.
You're guilty, and now we'll give you a trial. That's the hearing. But that's why he shouldn't cooperate with the hearings, because it's an unfair process. It's a process just determined to nail him. It's a process in which a guy like Elijah Cummings can have Cohen come in, commit perjury 7 times, and threaten him with prosecution, and now it has the shame. He has the gall to appear and pontificate. This is the guy who said, "I'm going to nail you if you lie."
I want to ask you a question.
And you didn't nail him because people can lie about Donald Trump and get away with it. Because you want to railroad him.
There's no question.
You don't want the truth.
But look, the president didn't fire anyone. The investigation was concluded unhindered. No executive privilege asserted. And yet Nadler wants to remove the president for obstruction when the president didn't fire anybody.
Yeah, and Mueller just said I couldn't conclude that he obstructed, despite the fact that I kind of got it all wrong under oath just a little while ago. But it is clear in his report he couldn't find evidence of obstruction. Now, believe me, if all those 18 Trump-hating, Hillary-loving, out-of-control, unethical prosecutors, not all of them unethical, a few of them really unethical, way over the top, some of them asleep, and one really asleep, if they couldn't find
anything
obstruction case, Nadler's going to find it? You think that guy's a good enough lawyer?
It's all politics. They don't work for the American people.
You listen to Nadler. You can see what he's like.
Let me tell you what the silver lining is. If it weren't for Donald Trump, we would never know how corrupt these Democrats are. We would never know for sure that there was a deep state. Now we know it.
But they're the biggest evidence against themselves. I mean, the biggest mistake they may have made is to call Mueller, which will give you an idea of how incompetent Nadler, Schiff. If you were a lawyer and you put that guy on the stand as your chief witness, your law firm would fire you. You would have fired the person as a DA, and I would have fired them as a U.S. attorney.
And as a judge, I would have dismissed the case.
I don't know about as congressmen. They're not pretty good. But as lawyers,
absolutely. Mayor Giuliani,
biggest
it's always
mistake
good
ever
to have
to put a
you
witness
here.
like that on the stand.
Thank you.